Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Iron Giant from 1999. The Iron Giant is one of the greatest directorial animation debuts I can ever think of, and is also a animation masterpiece. It's one of maybe the last few American major studio 2D animated masterpieces. It's really quite remarkable what it does. But I think to really understand what it's doing, you have to look at the structure that it's using. Now, obviously, this was based on a book called The Iron Man from Ted Hughes, and for legal reasons that I'm sure you probably figured out when I said the title, they didn't call it The Iron Man, they called it The Iron Giant. So, The Iron Giant, basically, when you look at it, and the thing that I think structurally what it's basically very influenced by is E.T. and Spielberg, which is interesting because The Iron Giant would itself be in a Spielberg movie later, which is very Spielberg because he seems to like things that share the same influences as him. But this takes on a whole new level with it and seems to do it for a reason. Now, the whole idea of Hogarth finding this robot in the woods one day after it looks like something has mysteriously fallen from the sky is very close to E.T. But I think the difference between Hogarth and Elliot is the difference between the two narratives, because in E.T. he's supposed to be a normal kid, or a normal kid of the time, basically, of the present day. But with Hogarth is doing well in school from what we're to understand, or at least academically. He cares for animals. He wants to teach the Iron Giant something. So the whole idea of the film goes with the little boy who finds whatever this is. But in terms of what Brad Bird is saying about the 50s, he's using the Norman Rockwell influence, which surprise, surprise, is another thing that very much influences Spielberg. That's a very conscious choice. Now, Norman Rockwell goes hand in hand with the 50s, obviously, but as Brad Bird, who did sort of work with Spielberg on Amazing Stories and, sort of loosely gets close to him, but they have not worked on something directly. But I think the idea of this film is the idea of what if a gun had a soul. That's kind of the log line that we always hear about the Iron Giant. When you look at doing that structure and doing this thing where let's have the thing that the boy finds, which in an older, more modest film would just be a dog, and that would be a cute film. And then, you get E.T. and you have the sci-fi element, but in this you have the Iron Giant. And with the Iron Giant being kind of the E.T. kind of character, it gets into all the ramifications of that. Because he's cute, you immediately understand him to have a soul, that this little kid it's this little kid's best friend, and all the kind of social ramifications of having a little kid's best friend. And you kind of introduce the soul of the Iron Giant, basically, or if he's Superman or whatever, first before you understand him as a gun. And almost saying that if these things themselves, who are launching these missiles or bullets or laser beams, had a soul, would they feel the same way about it? Would they be more protective? Would they not want to shoot these things and hurt people as much as they do? And having that structure is a genius move, because you know that structure. E.T.'s one of the most watched movies ever. It's been riffed off a bunch, Mac and Me reference, and we all know it. And using that with paranoia of the 50s, with the atomic age and everything like that, and kind of melding it together, because in a sense, Kent Mansley really represents that kind of fragile kind of male ego of the time period that didn't portray themselves that way, but probably was. Him just wanting that threat to happen, expecting that threat to happen, Sputnik being in the air. Sputnik is kind of an interesting story to go on throughout this film, because it was a fear that the Russians had the satellite in the air, and what was it trying to do? Was it spying on us? Could it see what the president was doing? All that kind of stuff. And it kind of feeds into that kind of paranoia, and that paranoia is very much in the background. They kind of have a duck and cover rip-off film called Atomic Holocaust, playing on more of the paranoia of it, not actually playing the actual educational film. It gets into all of that, but it also gets into the moral ramifications of using this weaponry. And this is a very anti-violence film, which I really love about it, because it is very anti-violence. All the big action sequences are heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see him have War of the Worlds type. I like how 50s that gets, when the Iron Giant really gets all, like, he looks like the alien spaceships from the older War of the Worlds. It looks like like a 50s sci-fi movie kind of a vibe, and also terrifying. It didn't feel out of place. It felt very much in the place. He very much stays within the style of, or culturally, what we understand the 50s to be, or at least in that point 20 years ago now when I'm shooting this, which does make me feel old because yes, I do remember when it came out in theaters. I didn't get to see it, unfortunately, and I wanted to, but I didn't get to. But one of the things I'm most interested in, especially more maybe now recently, is using that studio big blockbuster kind of big studio machine or whatever to make a film that really says something. Because it's one thing to make like a kind of an issue picture with a movie star that maybe more people would see than see a typical educational film, but it's another thing to make a film like this that if you've ever gotten to see this in a theater, which I did eventually see it in the theater, and audiences get so into it. Now, they're much more primed now because no one's going into the theater as their first time. Maybe a few people, but most people who are going to see it have seen it already, so they're primed to laugh. But there's a real emotional reaction to going through this narrative in a theater. Through it, you feel that anti-violence message because you don't want him to die. You also don't want him, the Iron Giant, to kill. You want him to grow. You want him to be friends with Hogarth, but you almost know that's an impossibility. You know, a gun can't be friends with you, but maybe it could if it wasn't shooting people. The anti-violence message works in that because it's a film about relationships and people. A film called The Iron Giant should be more of a B movie with explosions and things like that. It shouldn't be about a character who you have an emotional connection with. And I think that's one of the great things that Brad Bird did with this. He's also very good at casting in this. I don't know how much he had to do with casting, but from even Vin Diesel as the Iron Giant, who I think does a good performance. Christopher McDonald as Kent Mansley, I really quite like him. He's probably one of my favorite parts of the whole film because character actors have such a unique personality that if you have a character actor in an animated film, animated films and animation needs voices with personality. You can't, that's why a lot of movie stars don't work in animation when they do voices because there's no personality to their voice. They use the physical elements in their performance typically, and that's not everyone has to be good at everything or anything like that, but I'm just saying. But I actually think Jennifer Aniston was very good in this. Harry Connick Jr. is like almost perfect as a beatnik. I think it's Eli Marienthal, who was also in American Pie as Stifler's younger brother in the same year. I think does a great performance. He won an Annie Award for his performance in this. It's a really nuanced, interesting performance. He gets the soul of a little kid. He was a little kid at the time, but he is so expressive and interesting and fun, and it's often can be comedic and breaks your heart. It's a really great performance. And a lot of the things in this film feels like a whole film that touches on the gamut. I mean, early on, from a squirrel or jumping out of someone's crotch to crying that you think this little boy has died is a pretty big emotional circle you have going on through this film, and the Iron Giant does it almost perfectly. This is universally beloved, and I think there's a real reason for the Iron Giant being universally beloved because they had a real perspective to say about this film. As much as it is trying to really say a point, and it absolutely is, it also connects you on such an emotional level, you can sometimes forget about that. You can also forget about the fact that the Iron Giant himself is mainly a CGI character in a 2D animation film, and it doesn't feel that way. I've heard that there was some algorithm to make the CGI animation look less perfect, so it wouldn't stand out as much. And to be honest, maybe it's because I'm more comfortable with CGI than I used to be, but it doesn't stick out to me very much at all. It kind of goes within the film very well. I don't know if they like combine traditional animation with CGI or anything like that, but he definitely feels different, but there's a narrative reason for that character to look different anyway, so you're probably more willing to accept that he's a different animation technique, which is kind of ingenious. For a long time, like, this launched Brad Bird for me. I remember when he got his thing at Pixar and did The Incredibles, I would go, oh, the Iron Giant guy, that film was so good. And I also think how he ran that production was interesting, like having each animator do a different sequence in the film. One animator in the making of I saw on the DVD I have, which is hosted by Vin Diesel, which is absolutely hilarious. You should check it out. I don't know if that made it on future Blu-rays or anything like that, but he said like he has his own film within the film. And oftentimes a lot of the set pieces feel that way, but they also feel very connected. Like, you could almost look at each of these individual sequences and set pieces and you could kind of tell they're directed and kind of shaped by someone else, but there's such a through line through them you almost don't notice it as well, which speaks to how good of a director Brad Bird is that he was able to get all that to connect together, like thematically how he gets all these things to connect together so flawlessly. You know, taking the kind of E.T. kind of idea, putting it into the 50s might sound like an already easy home run, but then he finds a reason for you to be there. You know, I think think often the problem with doing a period thing is you're like, well, why are you in this period in the first place? And you don't question it pretty early on, because he uses like having a beatnik, having 50s sci-fi movies and things like that, having the atomic age, but it all works within the fear of killing each other, the fear of hurting each other, the fear of violence at a time when people were very ready to attack each other. And that's a very universal kind of idea that the Iron Giant has within it. It's a universal idea that sadly will probably go on way past when I'm alive, because that's just the ideas within the Iron Giant are insanely universal. I don't know, I've cried at this film, I've laughed at this film so many times, and it's such a powerful movie. I didn't see the one with new scenes because at a certain point, this is the film to me. This is too personal of a film. And being burned on special editions and director's cuts, once the film is out there, it's the film, and it's nice. I think he mainly did it to get a more celebrated release, and that's fine. But I think this is a crowning achievement for Brad Bird, because it shows one thing. Brad Bird is a craftsman. As much as he is an auteur, he's a craftsman. But he's a craftsman who understands why he's making the craft. And that is something that's so on display in Iron Giant. When you look at how he embodied that in his films with Pixar, even looking at Ratatouille or the Incredibles films or his Mission Impossible movie, he understands the usage of that. He's such a well-trained craftsman. He knows and understands the use of all of those things in every shot, and having people do these different things with animation in this. And because this is the only film of his that's not Michael Giacchino. It's Michael Kamen, who does a really great job. It's interesting, he didn't work with Michael Kamen again. It's just Michael Giacchino over and over again. But I really like this score quite a bit. I look at this and I understand the promise of Brad Bird. You've been trying to make a film forever. I appreciate the Spirit reference. I didn't get it at the time. At the time, I was like, oh, cool, the Spirit. I've heard of that. And now it's like, oh, yeah, you try to do that. What makes the Iron Giant so special is what sort of makes Brad Bird special, is he understands why he's doing a documentary part at the beginning of The Incredibles is to make a point about the character. And this film 100% is about character first, and through little interactions at the end, you understand the character so completely, and you understand them before you understand why you don't want violence. I think if you are to lose someone to something that's violent, the sad thing is you will miss their personality and you will miss them. The saddest part of this film is when you think Hogarth might be dead. When you think that, you both understand why he would want to hurt them, but then you realize that's not what Hogarth taught him, and that's not what he actually should do. And in some ways, the ending when he does stop the bomb and says Superman, that was the promise that Hogarth wanted him to be. And that's maybe the promise that man and humanity really should be, is not be about destroying each other and defending each other and be so ready to do that, but ready to take care of one another and maybe understand ourselves and pass on the good moral lessons and try to advance past that and not hold us down for our own kind of maybe selfish gains, but also understand why we're doing each of these things. And I think the Iron Giant wants us to re-examine violence and violent acts. And it's interesting. I think this film comes for much more of a meditative place and is almost kind of acting like there'll be no more conflict, which is very pre-9/11 thing to think. But I find this film to be so full of life and love, but also contemplation, and a contemplative place to really examine and re-examine violence. Because I think when you think that Hogarth is dead, as an audience, and as you sat through it and you understand how he cares about monster movies and he cares about the Iron Giant, obviously he's not really dead, but that moment strikes you in a way that you understand that violence could take away someone you love, and could take away someone who is a human, who is a person, and how it would feel to be the gun, and how it would feel to kind of get that revenge as the gun, and how the emotions and the soul of all of that. And I think, the question is, what if a gun had a soul? Then I think it would really question what it's doing in the first place. And I think the Iron Giant is often questioning what his role is in life, which is much like how we all feel. But I think how we all feel, we understand our place, hopefully isn't the place that is assigned to him, and that it is the role that you choose, not the role that you're given. And as the Iron Giant chooses not to choose that role, it shows you that maybe violence isn't really the path that we all should go down. So if you have seen The Iron Giant and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.